Appreciate everybody joining today. My name is Sam Lucido. I manage a very technical group of Oracle DBAs and other DBAs around the world. And our goal is to bridge the gap between the engineering that takes place and how to use it and some best practices in terms of putting workloads like Oracle, Microsoft SQL Server, SAP on servers for the best performance and protection. George, back to you.
So now let's get started. Let's quickly just go through the agenda for this presentation. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to highlight some findings of a recent survey we conducted of Oracle DBAs. Then we're going to highlight just, some of the differentiators between converged and hyper-converged infrastructure. And then I'm going to turn it over to Sam, and he's going to talk about the 3 laws of Oracle licensing, and then we'll go through a few different examples and scenarios that apply these 3 laws. And then we'll wrap all up with a summary at the end. So one thing, we obviously have a great partnership with the Bug, but we also have a great partnership with the Independent Oracle User Group, which is a nationwide organization of about 30,000 Oracle members, or Oracle users. And we recently did a survey with them. And what we'd like to do is hear the customer challenges and things that are causing, pain points for them and their businesses, but also what strategies are they trying to use or implement to reduce those challenges and, focus more on innovation. And so one of the things we saw from the strategy standpoint was a lot of infrastructure and automation was built in to help the databases become much more efficient at scale. And so as you can see, virtualization of databases is something that it continues to be very important to a lot of customers. Database and data center automation is being more and more widely used. But you also notice database and data center consolidation, removing all the silos that traditional workloads used to have by putting it all and as you can see at the bottom, the most extremely important strategy for customers in the next few years in terms of Oracle and database infrastructure is standardizing across the board on that IT infrastructure. How you standardize on IT is really up to your IT infrastructure is really up to you. There are different outcomes. Some people like to build their own, and this can be through reference architectures and tested and validated solutions. But we're seeing more and more customers go towards the right of this arrow and going towards a turnkey single vendor lifecycle assurance from a buying outcome. And so one of the versions or options when it comes to that are engineered or converged infrastructure systems. From a Dell EMC perspective, our converged and hyper-converged infrastructure portfolio consists of these 3 offerings. Many of you would be familiar with the V block on the left for enterprise data center, the traditional mission-critical workloads. But on the far right, we have appliances in a VX Rail, where that's more for enterprise edge and remote offices or small businesses, and it only contains the components of storage and compute, but you can start small and scale as big as you want on your own terms. And in the middle, we have VX Rack, which is a bit of a mix of the two. It can support some of the high-level enterprise traditional workloads, but also industry-specific mixed workloads depending on the industry. For the licensing examples, what we will have is Sam's going to walk through and use the VX Rack as the example. However, all of the best practices and tips that he'll be sharing with you apply to all 3 of these options. Sam, so do you want to just take it from there?
George, thank you very much. Greatly appreciate it. And thank everybody for joining today. My name's Sam Lucido, and I'll be taking you through the Oracle licensing conversation. I want to let you know that the licensing conversation is for educational purposes only, meaning I'm trying to give you guidelines and recommendations on how to approach Oracle licensing. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So there are 3 laws of Oracle licensing, and let's go through those 3 laws because they're critically important for the rest of our conversation. The first law is we must license Oracle in terms of processors where the program is installed, meaning that the database doesn't simply have to be running. If you just simply install the database, you must license that database on the processors to where the database is installed. Number 2. You must license Oracle where the database is running or where the program is running. So note that installed is past tense and running is present tense. So 1 and 2 apply to running the Oracle database wherever it's either installed and or running. Law number 3 combines laws 1 and 2 to say these rules apply both to a physical and virtual environment or platform, right? It's interesting to know that if you look at your Oracle contract, and I encourage you to do so, search for the term virtual or virtualization or some form of that word, you'll notice that in your Oracle contract, it's probably not referred to. And that means that in terms of Oracle licensing, virtualization, it's virtualization agnostic. So the rules 1 and 2 really apply to both physical and virtual infrastructures. So building on one of my favorite books, I'm going to use the Lord of the Rings theme here. And we have the 5 rings of non-contractual Oracle documents. And what are those? Those are the software investment guide, the licensing data recovery guide, the technology hosting guide, partition policy, and, of course, the cloud computing environment guide. Now, if you were to read those guides, they're very good guides, and they seem to really apply to Oracle contractual obligations, right? But if you look at the fine print across all those guides, what you'll notice is, and I give you an example down there at the bottom of the screen, is this document is for educational purposes only. You'll note that this document may not be incorporated into any contract, or nor does it constitute any commitment by Oracle. So these 5 documents really are not included in the Oracle contract and have language in the documents themselves that explicitly excludes them from being included into the Oracle contract. So it's very important that if you're reading the Software Investment Guide or some of these other papers to understand that these documents truly don't apply to your contractual obligations. Now, using the Lord of the Rings analogy here, let's ask you a question. 3 rings for the elven kings under the sky, 7 for the dwarf lords in the halls of stone, but how many for mortal men doomed to die? Anybody want to take a guess at how many rings there were? If you guess 9, that's absolutely correct, and congratulations to you. But there are 3 rings in terms of contractual documents for Oracle. And you'll note on the left-hand side, I list them for you. There's the core processor factor table, the technology support policies, and the purchase and support ordering documents. I will take you through the core factor table in a slide or two to explain how that works. So it's important that you make sure that, indeed, these documents are referenced in your Oracle contract. And by reading and reviewing your Oracle contract, you're going to do 3 very important things. First of all, you're going to be prepared because you'll have a greater understanding of your Oracle contract. And any conversations you have, whether internally or with Oracle, you can ask all the right questions, right? Know who to talk to. In terms of contractual discussions, it's Oracle Legal that you need to talk to, right? Those are the only folks who can update, change, or discuss your contract with you. If you need assistance, I'm going to talk about a couple partners of ours that we've worked with in the past that can offer you some great assistance in terms of managing those licensing discussions with Oracle. Now, another question for you. In the land of Mordor, where the shadows lie, 1 ring to rule them all, 1 ring to find them, 1 ring to bring them all, and in darkness bind them. In the land of Mordor, where the shadows lie, who created that 1 ring to rule them all? Anybody want to venture a guess? If you guess Sauron, you guess correct. Again, congratulations to you. So if we're talking about Oracle licensing in terms of a processor-based licensing, let's discuss what a processor is, because it's very important for us to know what part of the processor applies to Oracle licensing. So the physical die, or what we call the single integrated circuit die, is the physical footprint of the semiconductor. It's the actual physical piece that you put in the motherboard or backplane of the server, right? Today's single integrated dies have typically 2 or more independent processors, and we call those cores, hence the term cores. Now, typically today's processors have multiple cores, which means that you can do or execute and read multiple instructions at one time. Here we have 4 cores within that single integrated circuit die. Now, this is the important point. Oracle, in terms of processor-based licensing, counts the number of cores. Remember, it's the number of cores that is licensed in terms of the database either being installed and or running. But we also have something called hyperthreading. And hyperthreading is Intel's proprietary simultaneous multi-threading implementation used to improve the performance and parallelization of computations, right? That's a long way of saying that we can handle multiple instructions per core at the same time. Now, it's not a doubling of performance with hyperthreading, but it is a performance benefit. And with today's CPUs, typically Oracle and VMware, both recommend that you enable hyperthreading on the systems that are running both VMware and Oracle. But for the performance, here's the good news. Oracle doesn't count hyperthreading, right? Those logical processors are not counted in terms of Oracle licensing, so you get that performance benefit from Oracle without having to pay any additional licensing. So let's collect some information so we can better understand some simple formulas we can use to estimate or, actually find out how many licenses and how much it would cost to have Oracle running on a system. So over to the left-hand side, you'll see the number of cores we're going to use in this example is 4. The Enterprise Edition is the edition of the database we're going to discuss in our scenarios. And, of course, the licensing type is the processor license type. There are other licensing types, but for the conversation, we're only going to discuss processor licensing as it relates to the Enterprise Edition. On the right-hand side, we have what's called the Oracle Processor Core Factor Table. This is one of those documents that is referenced in the Oracle contract. Now, I realize it's kind of small because I took a picture of it and I tried to paste it in a document. You'll notice that I use Intel processors from the table, and you'll note on the right-hand side of that table, we have what's called the Core Processor Licensing Factor. And it's kind of small, but it says 0.5 for those x86 Intel CPUs. Down at the bottom, we have the Oracle Technology Global Price List. Now, keep in mind, again, this is one of those documents that's not referenced in the contract. In fact, I took the small print out of there, and you'll note that it says, for educational purposes only, subject to change without notice. So the idea is that I'm using this just as a guideline to show how the investment companies make pans out, right? So for the Enterprise Edition, it's $47,500, and for software support, it's $10,450. And then if we use the multi-tenant option with the Enterprise Edition, that's another $17,500. And software and support, again, is $3,850. So let's use all these numbers and tie it all together and trying to estimate both the number of licenses we need and the cost. So in here, we put together a few simple formulas that we could use for estimating the number of licenses and costs. In terms of number of licenses, it's just a simple formula. It's the number of processor cores. In this case, it was 4, multiplied by the core factor. So 4 times 0.5 equals 2. Now we know we need 2 Oracle Enterprise licenses if we're going to use it on a 4-core system. The license cost is simply the $47,500 for the Enterprise Edition multiplied by 2, which comes out to $95,000. For the multi-tenant option, it's the $17,500 multiplied by 2 again. That's the number of licenses we need. That's about $35,000. And, of course, the last 2 items, you can see the support costs and the multi-tenant support costs, again, multiplied by 2, respectively, for each. The grand total is $158,600. Now, keep in mind, this is list prices, no discounts. Oracle works with customers very closely. Typically, customers do receive a discount. So we can see that Oracle licensing is a significant investment by the company. It is very important for the DBA or for anybody who manages Oracle databases to make sure that licensing is followed and you stay within compliance, right? So let's talk about what was called the Galaxy licensing scenario. And we're going to use, again, a VxRack infrastructure here. And this is called VxRack SDDC, as you can see on the upper right-hand side of the slide. SDDC stands for Software Defined Data Center. And to start at the bottom of the stack, we use VMware Virtual SAN, or what we call vSAN. Lower storage costs without any performance impact. We have virtual networking, or NSX networking from VMware vSphere. and of course VMware vSphere for administration and management of the entire virtual infrastructure. And then we have SDDC Manager at the top to manage the entire infrastructure as well. You'll note that we have 8 VxRack nodes, and of the 8 VxRack nodes, at the very top there, you'll note in red, we are licensing 12 CPUs in the system. Now, the entire system, all 8 nodes, equates to having 192 cores. So we only want to license 12 of the 192 cores. So in terms of Oracle licensing, what Oracle says is you have the capability of taking your virtualized database and moving it to any of those servers within this entire infrastructure. And because you have that capability to do that, you have to license all the nodes within the infrastructure. In fact, to the left-hand side here, you'll notice that I have a link when you receive this presentation. That link takes you to a great VMware support article and talks to you a little bit about what Galaxy licensing is. So the idea here is that Oracle would say you have to license all 192 cores. Now, considering the formulas that we just went through and the expense of Oracle just on 4 cores, we can understand that having to license 192 cores is a huge investment. But does it really apply? In other words, does Galaxy licensing really hold up to the rules in our Oracle contracts? Let's explore that. So our first rule is that we must pay for Oracle where it's installed, and our second rule is where it's running. If we apply both of those rules, then what we really find is that we truly only have to license Oracle on those 12 cores. Wow, we just saved ourselves a ton of money applying those rules right there. So you can see understanding the rules as it applies to your contract gives you the capability really to define just how many cores you have to license. In this case, it's a myth. Oracle Galaxy licensing doesn't hold up to Rule 1 and Rule 2 in terms of licensing compliance as it relates to Oracle. Let's talk a little bit about soft partitioning as it relates to Oracle licensing. Now, if you remember, I licensed just 12 of 24 cores within a VxRack node. So I didn't even license all the cores within one single node. And you'll notice on the left-hand side of this slide, near the bottom, we have VxRack SDDC, like I talked to you about. But there's another flavor or version of VxRack. It's called Flex Node. And Flex Nodes are pretty cool because it's a different stack. And let me start at the bottom of the stack. We have Scale.io, which provides great software-defined storage and great performance for your Oracle databases. We have Cisco Nexus Networking. The implementation could be either physical or virtual, and then we use VCE Vision to manage the entire infrastructure there. So in this case, I'm going to use VxRack Flex Node as a physical implementation. Now, I have 2 approaches in which I can limit Oracle running to 12 cores. I'll start on the left-hand side. With VMware virtualization, I have something called Processor Scheduling Affinity. And with Processor Scheduling Affinity, I can use that to tie the Oracle database running to named CPUs within the system, meaning that the database is only running on 12 named CPUs in the system. That means the read and executes are only going to run on those 12 cores. VMware House of Brick has a great paper on this. I'll show you the paper at the end of the presentation. And they talk about the capability to do this and give you some tips and tricks. So that's coming up. And then on the right-hand side, a physical implementation, we have something called socket disabling. And you can do that multiple ways. If the server supports it, you can disable the socket from running using BIOS settings. Or another option might be physically removing the processor from the motherboard or backplane and doing that as well. Although these implementations are different, they accomplish the same thing. So it's the capability to limit the Oracle database running on a subset of cores. So let's look at that in terms of what Oracle says with its soft partitioning policy. In the soft partitioning policy, Oracle states, unless explicitly stated elsewhere in this document, soft partitioning is not permitted as a means to determine or limit the number of software licensing required for any given server or clusters. Further down the page, they say, any technology not listed in the hard partitioning section, and by the way, that is disabling a secondary socket using BIOS or pulling it out of the motherboard, as we discussed. That means that if it's not referenced in the hard partitioning section of the document, it's considered soft partitioning, and then refer up to the statement just above that again, meaning it's not recognized as a way of limiting the number of CPUs. But again, look at the fine print of this document, and fine print reads, this document is provided for educational purposes only, and it may not be incorporated into any contract. So giving us the fine print and looking at the fine print of that document really provides some insights. But let's also apply some rules to this as well. But if you were just simply to follow the soft partitioning policy, you will note that Oracle is basically saying that you would have to license all 24 cores on that single VX rack node, right? But again, applying the rules, rule number 1, where the programs are installed, rule number 2, where the programs are running, we would note that it's a myth. Soft partitioning is a myth. If we're able to limit where the database is running using VMware CPU affinity or by BIOS settings and a physical implementation, that means is that we'd only have to pay for those 12 cores that the database is installed to or running on, right? So again, soft partitioning doesn't really apply to Oracle licensing. A lot of people have virtualized their Oracle databases. As you saw up front, George went over an IOUG study in which over 300 DBAs talked about the advantages of virtualizing their Oracle databases. And a lot of those folks use what's called a VMware cluster in which they put their Oracle databases. And right here we have what's called a mixed application cluster. So in this mixed application cluster, you'll note that the first 2 VX rack nodes are running Oracle. The first one's running our production Oracle database, and the second one is running our test and development systems. And then the third VX rack system all the way over there to the right is a non-Oracle system, right? So that means nothing in terms of Oracle is running on that system. So what Oracle would like you to say is that, well, because you have that capability, and again, this is similar to Galaxy licensing, because you have the capability of moving Oracle to that third system within the VMware cluster, you have to license that third system. Again, that can be very expensive, but does it really hold up to rules 1 and 2? And what we find is it doesn't, because Oracle technically is not running on that system. It's not installed and or running on that third system, right? So it's a myth. You don't have to license all the servers, or in this case, VX rack nodes, within a VMware cluster, right? But let's go through another scenario that can happen, and it's called a compliance gap, right? And this is sometimes when I work with customers, I don't recommend putting Oracle and non-Oracle workloads in the same cluster because this has happened before. And with Oracle, whether it's accidental or purposely done, if you move that virtualized database from a server that's been licensed to a server that hasn't been licensed, then that creates what's called a licensing gap, right? And that licensing gap could be very big. In this case, you would have to license the third VX rack node. That could be, on the order of nearly $1 million, right? Because the database technically could be executing across all 24 cores within that system. Obviously, we want to prevent that type of thing happening. So, yes, you could use a mixed cluster with Oracle in it, and you even have tools like affinity rules and anti-affinity rules to really help tie down and prevent Oracle moving to a non-licensed system. But, it might be a better consideration, a less risky option, to actually create a dedicated VMware cluster for Oracle. And here, that's what we see. So let's go through a particular scenario that's pretty common with customers. We have our Oracle production database running on the VX rack node to the left, and we're going to create a copy, take a snapshot of that production database, get that up and running, and then we're going to move that copy over to the test and development system. Now, does that constitute any additional licensing from Oracle? Well, let's take a look at that. As long as I've licensed both servers, and in this case, Oracle across both servers, I can move the databases back and forth between those servers and not be out of compliance. So this is why a dedicated VMware cluster for Oracle makes a lot of sense. If you license, in this case, the 2 VxRack nodes fully within the cluster, you can move the databases around from node to node and have no problems in terms of licensing because it's all been licensed. You can use any of those cores for any purpose as it relates to Oracle. So this is a very good example of using Oracle in a dedicated cluster to minimize risk, right? Another way of looking at this is with servers sharing the same storage. In this case, we're going to use the example of VMware Virtual SAN or vSAN storage. And Oracle, you might hear Oracle say, hey, the database is using a shared storage system. And because it's using a shared storage system, all the nodes within that shared storage system might have the capability to see the Oracle binaries and Oracle administrative directories from the Oracle hosts within that shared storage system. So Oracle might say you have to license all the nodes on a shared storage system, right? Well, again, is this truly the case? Let's apply our rules. As long as the database is not installed and or running on those other systems, even though it's a shared storage system, you don't have to license. Now, the obvious thing to say here is that, generally speaking, you won't have to validate, but, if you really want to be cautious, validate that you cannot access the Oracle Home and related admin directories from non-Oracle hosts. I mean, that's a great way to prove that point. So if you have a server, non-Oracle server, log into that server and see if you can see the Oracle Home or database from that server to your Oracle servers, and the answer should be no, right? If the answer is no, again, you don't have any further licensing obligations from Oracle, so it's a myth. Having to license all nodes connected to a shared storage system is not necessary. Let's talk about storage replication, right? And in storage replication, a lot of our customers use this. And the cool thing about storage replication, it really allows you the capability to replicate the database and any other systems related to the database in a consistency group, either within the same data center or to a secondary data center, right? So in terms of this architecture, what we see on the left-hand side is the production database is up and running within the primary data center. It's mounted, meaning that the files that compose the database are all viewable by the VxRack node there. And then on the right-hand side, in a remote data center, we see that the database files are replicated over there, but here's the critical point, it's unmounted. And by unmounted, that means that the database files cannot be seen by any host in the other data center or in our secondary data center. If the files cannot be seen and they're not viewable by VxRack node or another server, that means you don't have to license that VxRack node or other server. Very important point. So you can use replication to protect yourself from a disaster without any additional licensing obligations. But what happens if a disaster does strike? And here, just to reinforce the point that I was making, using replication does follow the guidelines of Rules 1 and 2, as we discussed. But if we have a disaster, right, there's two things you ought to know about. There's the 10-day rule, and a lot of DBAs are very familiar with the 10-day rule. And the 10-day rule basically says that a customer is allowed to fail over the database to an unlicensed server for a total of 10 days per year, as long as the database is failed back or recovered back to the original system within those 10 days. There's no licensing obligation on the behalf of the customer. So let's take you through that scenario. We have a disaster in our primary data center, and notice on the right-hand side in our secondary data center, the lungs become mounted. In other words, they can be seen by the VxRack system. So now we have the capability of bringing up the Oracle database on that VxRack node. That VxRack node is not licensed, but as long as the database is running with 10 days or less on that unlicensed node and recovered back to the primary data center, we are in compliance with our Oracle contract, right? So in this case, we recover our primary data center. We switch the direction of the replication, recover the production database back to our primary data center. Notice on the left-hand side it says mounted. So now our production database is back to the original server. And we've done that within the 10 days. So we remain within the contractual obligations for our database. Now, another nice thing I'd like to point out in terms of Oracle is backup testing. Oracle allows customers to restore a copy of production 4 times per year, 2 days each time. So DBAs should take advantage of this because the capability to recover your database and test that recovery is in your contract. Now, a little side conversation here that's very important. The date of your contract matters here, and that's why knowing your contract is so important. Prior to 2008, the language was that the 10-day rule applied to recovering the database in a secondary data center. But if you have a newer contract, a contract after 2008, right, the language might have changed, and this is why you have to know your contract so well. Oracle will say that the 10-day rule applies to recovering the database within the same data center. That's a big difference versus a secondary data center. So again, look at the contract and know how the 10-day rule applies to you in terms of recovering your databases. So let's summarize this and throw this all together. Knowing the 3 rules, knowing that we must license the database where it's installed, where the database is running, and notice that the rules 1 and 2 apply both to the physical and virtual implementations of Oracle. There is little to no difference. Again, go through your contract and see if there's any distinction made between virtual and physical implementations of Oracle. To understand your contract is to know that the rules determine your licensing compliance. And it also means that you know whether what has been licensed by your business and whether your business is in compliance within the contract. It may sound simple, those 3 things, but a lot of people don't know it. And if you do, it means that you're an Oracle licensing hero. You understand much more than probably most people do as it relates to your Oracle contract and your Oracle licensing obligations and how to manage Oracle within your data center. House of Brick, great partner, worked with House of Brick many times. They have what I call the definitive guide to Oracle licensing. If you get a copy of this presentation, just click on that image right there, and it'll take you to that guide. Please download it. It goes into exhaustive detail around all the rules and guidelines and recommendations as it relates to Oracle licensing. House of Brick has several services. I just want to hit the big hitters right here. They can do an Oracle licensing review for you. They can do licensing optimization, audit, defense, exit consulting. They can do new and renewal licensing consulting, and they even have a managed licensing support service for Oracle. Again, very knowledgeable people that have been talking about Oracle licensing for quite some time. A new company, well, new's not the right term, but a company that's been around for a little while, but I think has a great solution as well, and definitely worth mentioning is VLSS, and the product is called License Fortress. With License Fortress, they guarantee their work, which I think is just absolutely amazing. And it's worth investigating for that guarantee. A couple other things that they do. They provide audit management tools for customers. They can do quarterly compliance reports. You have access to licensing experts and so much more as it relates to VLSS. Down at the bottom there, I provide a link to their services. So if you're interested in getting a guarantee around your Oracle licensing compliance, these are the people to talk to. George, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Thanks, Sam. Great stuff. So just to wrap up, one last thing we wanted to do, in addition, was just highlight that at Dell EMC we have a Dell EMC Community Network, which is an online forum made up of several mini forums or subgroups that talk about all the different things that we offer when it comes to knowledge sharing. Like we have an Everything Oracle at Dell EMC. We have product-based ones, product support group one. And the value of it is that it's not only just where we post our latest blogs, our latest white papers, demos, presentations like the one we just went through, but we also, it enables people, it's free to use, it's free to join, and users can share experiences and ask questions and answer each other's questions in addition to engaging with our most technical experts across the different portfolio. So we invite you to visit the Dell EMC Community Network, and specifically in this case, Everything Oracle at Dell EMC. And with that, we just wanted to say thank you for the opportunity from the bug and for all of you for your time today.
Hey, George, Sam here. Are there any questions that we could answer for folks? Did you see anything there?
I did. Excuse me. I see a few in the chat. Someone was asking, in the case of VxRail, if I have 4 nodes and only one Oracle database, is it possible the data would sit on all 4 nodes?
Great question. On VxRail, we'd have to look at how you implement Oracle on VxRail. But generally speaking, if you follow many of the rules and guidelines that we presented today, we could pretty much assure you that the number of CPUs or processor cores that you're using with the database is all that you'd have to license. Yes, and that's right. VxRail is using vSAN technology, and there's, by the way, a great study by VMware with vSAN as it relates to Oracle in terms of performance. But again, yes, we have the capability to make sure that the database is running on a set number of processors, whatever that may be, 4 to 12 processors, and then that way your license is only impacted by the number of cores, processor cores that your database is using. Keep in mind whether it's vSAN, Scale.io, traditional SAN, storage does not impact licensing. Right? The only caveat to that is that you don't want non-Oracle servers to be able to see the Oracle home of a Oracle-based server via shared storage. Okay, and that's why Oracle is calling that out in that one example. But yes, with vSAN, Scale.io, and many of those other software-defined solutions, as well as traditional storage, storage is not going to impact your licensing. I hope I answered that question.
Great. Another question was, can you talk about how to monitor Oracle licensing compliance?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, let me say VLSS is a great partner of ours and a leader in terms of monitoring, and making sure that you remain in compliance with your Oracle implementation at your company. They offer reports. They offer a help desk in which you can call Oracle experts. I would really encourage you to give them a ring, as well as maybe another partner or two that I mentioned in here. The monitoring has to be proactive, right? Because you've seen what can happen when you mistakenly move a virtualized Oracle database to a non-licensed host. That compliance gap could be a big number, right? And we really don't want that to happen. So the proactive monitoring and getting assistance on an annual basis, that small investment might have very big returns for you in managing Oracle to make sure that that doesn't happen to you, right? So I would encourage you to go out and engage one of those partners like VLSS and see what they can do for you. And of course, if you're kind of a DIY team, you like to do it yourself, asset management is sometimes a little bit difficult, but it can be done. I've seen some teams do it very well internally, and that works great too. If you use a strategy, for example, of a dedicated Oracle cluster, like we discussed in the presentation today, that is one way in which you can make sure that you're in compliance with an Oracle contract. So hopefully those tips will help out.
Great. Thanks, Sam. From the Q&A, it looks like that's pretty much it. So if there aren't any other questions, Sam and I would both like to thank everyone for their time today, and have a great day.